Hello, and welcome to this episode of Talk and Adoption. And today we'll be looking at how we can prepare family and friends. I'm Grace Gomez, and I am the Adoptive Diversity Recruitment Officer, and I work for PAT Charity in the Reading office. And I'm joined by Rebecca, who's a senior social worker today, who'll be answering the questions. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Okay, so first of all, PAT and other adoption agencies talk about the importance of having a support network. Why is this particularly important for adoptive families?
Well, the reason we feel this is important is because we always explore with prospective adopters the support network that they have and the support that people can provide them. Support can come in a different variety of forms, such as emotional support, somebody they can just pick up the phone to talk to, practical support if they needed someone to bring something over, or somebody in their network who can provide emergency support in a very short space of time. So it's really important that we explore that with prospective adopters because different scenarios can happen at different periods. And to be honest, in terms of adoption, everybody needs parenting support, parenting advice, and so forth. And so that's why we explore that with people going through this process.
And so how does PAT help prospective adopters to prepare their family and friends?
So we encourage prospective adopters to have open conversations with friends and families about adoption, the process, the training, what they learn, because eventually at some point, friends and families are going to meet the children that they decide to adopt. So we always encourage prospective adopters to talk about some of the themes that come up with an adoption, so things such as attachment, trauma, and what children experience who have been through the care system or been removed from birth families. And at PAT, we encourage later on in the process, and people have proceeded through being approved, to be able to attend our friends and family training, which goes into a little bit more detail about that.
All children placed for adoption are first and foremost children who've had a difficult start to their lives. And some children will settle with their adoptive families and cope, and some children need additional support. So what can prospective adopters do to help to prepare their family and friends for this?
So we always encourage prospective adopters that it's really important to let them take the lead in terms of when they will meet the children that is placed with them. I know for friends and families, it could be really exciting after a child is placed. They want to meet the child straight away. But essentially the focus when a child is first placed is for prospective adopters to focus on building a bond with that child and attachment building, because essentially they're going to be strangers first and foremost, and that can take some time. So it's really important that you allow your prospective adopter and your friends and family network to advise you when it's the right time to be able to visit, because that's going to be different for every child. And also at the point friends and families do meet with the child, it's really important that the child takes the lead in relation to the relationship that might build with that person. It might be that some children are very shy, it might be that some children are very talkative. We would recommend that prospective adopters advise friends and families to just let the child take the lead and let the relationship grow naturally.
So how can prospective adopters include their family and friends in the adoption process?
So as I mentioned earlier, we always encourage prospective adopters to talk to their friends and families about some of the themes that might come up within adoption. In terms of what we promote at PAT and within adoption, we talk a lot about therapeutic parenting. We talk about a concept called PACE, and we also talk about a concept called TheraPlay, which are both helpful parenting techniques in terms of building a relationship with a child in a prospective adoptive care. So we would openly encourage those discussions for families and friends to learn a little bit more about that. And again, we encourage any friends and families to attend PAT training day, which we hold, which talks a bit more in depth about the themes that impact children who have experienced trauma or difficult starts in their life.
What support are new parents likely to need in the early days?
So in the early days, as all new parents would experience, it will be about adjusting to having a child or children in their care. That time period can be really busy for everybody. And so friends and families are able to even just, do small tasks like preparing and providing some home cooked meals for them. That would be really beneficial in terms of supporting prospective adopters with those types of tasks while they can focus on settling children into their full-time care. Also, with lots of things that would be going on during that period in terms of children transitioning into their care and settling in, even just a simple text message or phone call to ask how they're doing. We'd also encourage friends and families to do that. That can be quite an emotional period of time for prospective adopters, and we feel it's really important that they have somebody to be able to check in with, whether they're talking about all the wonderful things that are happening or if they're maybe finding it a little bit harder than they envisage. We would always promote that friends and family are reaching out to support prospective adopters during that period. For single adopters who are not in a relationship with somebody, it might be that friends and families are encouraged to support in a slightly different way early on in the process. And that can involve them physically meeting with the child quite soon after a placement. We would always encourage prospective adopters to think about who in their support network be able to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, it's always really important that you let prospective adopters take the lead in that to advise you when the right time for that is, as well as letting the child take the lead when you first initially meet with them. And over time, as things go on, it might be that you become quite a trusted and supportive person within the network, where you're able to provide maybe some childcare, whether that's for an hour or half a day. Again, let the prospective adopter take the lead in that. But it's always about exploring people in the network who are able to provide support in any way they can.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. So what can family and friends expect when meeting with the child or children for the first time?
So the children that are placed for adoption have usually come from backgrounds where they've experienced trauma or had poor attachments with birth parents or birth family members. And because of those experiences, it might be, regardless of their ages, they might present younger in age than their actual chronological age. We would always advise that, please be patient with these children. Prospective adopters will have the best knowledge in how they can support them. It might be that you observe some behaviours that you'll consider strange or is a bit younger than the actual age of the child. But in terms of development, it might mean that in terms of the way a prospective adopter addresses or supports the behaviour that a child is displaying, it will be in the child's best interest, regardless of how they do that. So, for example, you might have a 5-year-old who needs to be self-soothed by using a baby's bottle to help them with that. If you notice something like that, as I've advised, please don't consider it strange, because in that situation, that might be in the child's best interest to help them self-soothe themselves if they've experienced a difficult situation or if they're upset. And at the end of the day, it will just be about doing whatever's in the best interest of that child.
So PACE, you mentioned that earlier, is a really effective method of having fun and building trust with children, and it can be a really useful distraction. Can you tell a little bit more about this PACE, please?
Yeah, sure. So PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And it's a way of thinking, feeling, communicating, and behaving between the interactions of a prospective adopter and a child to help that child feel safe in their care. It's really effective in meeting the needs of children and young people who have experienced trauma. And it's a way of implementing attachment-focused family therapy. It was a concept that was developed by a clinical psychologist called Dan Hughes. And essentially, it focused on building trusting relationships, emotional connections, and giving that child a sense of security between the child and the prospective adopter. And we talk about it a lot at PACS in adoption training to help them build an attachment with a child.
So finally, have you got any top tips for the family and friends of new parents?
So in terms of top tips, we would just strongly advise the family and friends to be mindful of the fact that adoptive parenting is entirely different to parenting a securely attached birth child. They need to do it in their way, but they'll need your support to do that. And so again, we would just be reminding family and friends that you might observe, some parenting skills, styles, techniques, which may not be usual for yourself, but in terms of these children who have experienced trauma, it's in their best interest that prospective adopters implement parenting in that way.
Yeah.
So we would just strongly encourage that you support your prospective adopters in those situations because they're doing what's in the child's best interest. And at PAC, as I mentioned earlier, we would definitely encourage any friends and family to come along to our training that we have for any friends or relatives who know of someone who's going through the process. And as I mentioned before, we highlight in training the different themes that we cover in adoption with prospective adopters and how you can best support and help them.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you. So there's lots more information on our website, www.paccharity.org, and we're on social media. So like and follow our Facebook page and our YouTube channel and our Instagram. So thank you very much. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.